The human fleet captain barely had time to react as the massive Arathian dreadnoughts emerged from the darkness of space, their hulls pulsing with an eerie bioluminescent glow. Like deep-sea predators, circling prey, his hands gripped the armrests of his command, share his crew scrambling as alarms blared across the bridge, proximity warnings, shields powering up, weapons charging. But before anyone could issue a command, every system on the ship locked up, overridden by an external force. The main screen flickered, static crackling before the image stabilized, revealing the source of the transmission. A woman with silver eyes that seemed to pierce through him. Her skin was a strange mix of deep violet and obsidian, etched with luminous veins that pulsed in sync with the hum of the Arathian warships. Her hair, or what looked like hair, was a flowing mass of glowing tendrils that shifted as if alive, a crown of living energy framing her cold expression. When she spoke, her voice was smooth but commanding, as if she was not making a request, but delivering an undeniable fact. "You are not enough human, we need more, we must multiply." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Confusion flashed across the captain's face before giving way to anger. He had been sent here as an envoy to negotiate trade agreements, not to be ordered around by an alien overlord. He leaned forward, his voice sharp as he demanded clarification. But the woman did not flinch. She simply studied him, her eyes calculating, measuring, weighing his worth. "I am Vale, Supreme Commander of the Arathian Dominion," she said, her voice unwavering. "Your people are no longer an isolated species. You have expanded into the stars, and now you are a necessary part of our survival." The captain exhaled sharply. Necessary part of their survival? What kind of madness was this? He glanced at his crew, his first officer shaking his head, scanning through data, trying to break through the system lockdown. But the Arathian control over their ship was absolute. They had been rendered helpless in seconds. And that meant this was not a mere meeting, this was a show of power. Vale continued, as if she had anticipated his resistance, her glowing tendrils pulsing in rhythm with her words. "Our species is dying," she declared. "Our genetic structure has reached stagnation. Centuries of evolution have led to deterioration. We are powerful, but incomplete. Without genetic renewal, our civilization will collapse within the next 100 cycles, and there is only one species in the known galaxy that is compatible with ours." Her silver eyes locked onto him as she spoke the final words with absolute certainty. "Humans." Silence filled the bridge, the crew frozen as they processed the weight of her statement. The captain clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around the armrests. So that was it. They weren't here to trade. They were here to claim humanity as their solution, as if people were nothing more than resources to be collected and exploited. His pulse pounded in his ears. But he forced himself to remain composed. He would not let these aliens see weakness. "And what exactly do you mean by multiply?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Vale tilted her head slightly, her gaze unreadable. "We need genetic integration to prevent our extinction," she said simply. "Your people will be incorporated into our society, into our future. We will not die, and neither will you. This is not a request, it is a necessity." A cold chill ran through the captain's spine. Necessity. The word echoed in his mind like a distant warning. If what she said was true, then refusing them would not be an option in their eyes. But humanity was not something to be claimed. His people had fought for their independence, their place in the stars. They had built that empire with blood, sweat, and ingenuity. And now this alien woman thought she could dictate their future with a single command. "And if we refuse?" he asked, his tone defiant. For the first time, Vale's expression shifted. Her glowing veins brightened slightly, her tendrils flaring. As she leaned closer to the screen, her voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried more weight than any shouted threat. "Then humanity will fall with us." The ship trembled, the screen flickered with new images, dozens of human colonies and outposts within Arathian territory, all of them going dark, power grids shutting down life support, failing communications severed in an instant. "We do not threaten, we act," Vale stated, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "You are strong, but not untouchable. We will have our answer soon, and we hope for your sake that it is the right one." The screen went black, the command systems remained locked, alarms still blaring, but the silence on the bridge was louder than anything else. The captain's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the blank screen, at the vast glowing armada beyond his ship. One thing was clear. Humanity had just been given an ultimatum. The bridge remained silent, the crew staring at the blank screen, the weight of Val's ultimatum pressing down on them like a crushing force. The captain exhaled slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. This was not just a negotiation, it was a demand backed by absolute power that Seraphians had demonstrated complete control over their systems, and now human colonies were going dark, one by one like candles being snuffed out in the void of space. The first officer broke the silence, his voice low but tense. "Captain, we need to act fast. If they have this level of control over our infrastructure, we are completely vulnerable." The captain did not respond immediately, his eyes locked on the fleet outside, massive structures of living metal shifting with an eerie grace. The Seraphians were unlike any species humanity had encountered before, not just in biology, but in mentality. They did not negotiate, they imposed their will. And yet there was something in Val's voice, not just cold calculation, but something deeper, desperation, urgency, as if she was clinging to the edge of a cliff and humanity was her only lifeline. The comms crackled again, but this time without warning. The screen flickered back to life, Val's face appearing once more, her silver eyes locked onto the captain, as if she could see the hesitation in his mind. Her expression was unreadable, but there was no doubt she was studying him, gauging his response, measuring his usefulness. "You hesitate," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "You do not understand the gravity of what is happening. Your people believe they are independent, strong, resilient, but you do not see the truth. You are still a young species, still fragile in the vastness of the cosmos. And now you stand at a threshold. You will either step forward with us or be left behind to crumble." The captain narrowed his eyes, his pulse steadying, his instincts screaming at him that this was no simple threat, but he would not allow her to dictate humanity's fate. "And what exactly do you expect from us?" he asked, his voice level. Val's tendrils pulsed, her bioluminescent veins glowing in waves as she considered his question. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she raised her hand, and a new projection materialized around her, an intricate display of genetic sequences, patterns shifting and merging, human DNA strands intertwining with Seraphian structures, forming something new, something unknown. "Integration," she said. "Our species is dying. Our genetics have reached an evolutionary dead end. Centuries of perfection have led us to stagnation. Our bodies no longer adapt. Our immune systems fail. We are powerful, but we are fragile, and that fragility will be our end unless we change, unless we evolve with you." The captain felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This was not just about reproduction, it was something far more profound. They were not asking for humans to breed with them, they were asking for a fundamental restructuring of their very biology, a fusion of two species into something new, something that had never existed before. His first officer whispered, barely audible, "They don't just want our DNA, Captain, they want to become something else entirely." Val's gaze never wavered, as if she had heard the whisper through the screen. "You understand now," she said. "This is not conquest. This is survival. We do not wish to destroy humanity. We wish to merge with it, to become greater together. Our future is entwined, whether you accept it or not." The captain's fists clenched, his mind struggling to process the sheer magnitude of what she was saying. This was beyond war, beyond diplomacy. This was rewriting the very essence of what it meant to be human, to be Seraphian, to be something more, or to be nothing at all. "And if we refuse?" he asked again, as he already knew the answer. Val exhaled softly, her tendrils tinning slightly as if a shadow of regret passed through her expression. "Then we will have no choice but to take what we need." The words sent a chill through the bridge, a quiet gasp from the communications officer, a sharp inhale from the weapons chief. They all understood the implication that Seraphians were not looking for allies, they were looking for a solution. And if humanity did not provide it willingly, they would take it by force. The captain's jaw tightened, his thoughts racing through potential escape strategies, countermeasures, but deep down he knew the truth. Humanity was unprepared for this. They had faced wars before, conquered planets, built empires, But this was different. This was not a battle of ships or weapons. This was a war for existence itself. Vale tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes never leaving his. "You have little time, Captain. The longer you resist, the weaker both of our species become. Choose wisely, for once the moment passes, there will be no turning back." The screen went black again, and for the first time in his life, the captain felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The silence on the bridge was suffocating the crew, waiting for their captain to speak, but he remained motionless, staring at the blank screen where Vale's silver eyes had been moments ago. Outside, the massive Carathian fleet hovered like silent predators, their ships shifting subtly as if alive, each one a fusion of organic and mechanical engineering. More than just vessels, they were an extension of the species itself. The first officer finally broke the silence, his voice hushed but urgent. "Captain, we need to respond. They have already shut down multiple colonies. If they escalate further, we could lose entire systems." The captain exhaled slowly, his mind racing through the implications. Humanity was not facing an enemy in the traditional sense, that Zarathians were not conquerors. They were desperate, and desperate species were unpredictable. Their demand was absolute: integrate or die. But something about the way Vale spoke unsettled him. She was not just issuing a threat, she was trying to convince him. He turned to the science officer, a young woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. "Give me everything we have on Zarathian genetics, any studies, comparisons, anything that explains why they think we are compatible." She nodded quickly, pulling up files, data streams flashing across her console as she worked the screens around the bridge, filled with genetic models, strands of Zarathian DNA shifting in real time, complex structures degrading, unstable, breaking apart. At a fundamental level beside them, human DNA was displayed, vibrant, resilient, constantly adapting. "They aren't lying," she muttered, her fingers flying across the interface. "Carathian biology has almost completely stagnated. Their regenerative systems are failing, their immune responses are weakening. They have perfected their form to such an extent that they can no longer change, no longer evolve. Their species is quite literally dying in slow motion." The captain's stomach tightened as the data confirmed everything Vale had said, but then the science officer froze, her hands hovering over the console, her expression shifting from concern to something darker. "So look at this." She enlarged the genetic models, displaying sequences from ancient records side by side, Zarathian and human DNA shifting, merging, aligning. They were similar, too similar. The first officer's breath caught as realization hit him. "This isn't just about compatibility," he said. "We share a common origin." A cold chill ran through the captain's veins. He leaned closer, studying the patterns, the unmistakable truth staring back at him: humanity, and that Zarathians were not just compatible, they were connected on a level deeper than anyone had realized. The science officer's voice was barely above a whisper. "A long-lost progenitor species must have seeded both of us across the stars. But while we evolved naturally, the Zarathians went down a path of artificial perfection. They engineered themselves into a corner, and now they need our raw adaptability to survive." The weight of the revelation pressed down on the captain's mind. This changed everything. The Zarathians did not just see humanity as useful, they saw humanity as their salvation, that only link to an existence they had nearly erased through their own pursuit of perfection. Before he could speak, the comms flared to life, a distress signal cutting through the silence. One of their colonies on the outer rim was under attack, not by the Zarathians, but by something else, something worse. The screen filled with static before stabilizing, revealing the terrified face of a colony administrator, her voice frantic as she screamed over the sounds of explosions. "We are under attack. They came out of nowhere. We can't stop them. They are consuming everything we need. Help, please, we need help." The signal cut out, replaced by a new one, Vale's face appearing once more, her expression unreadable. But there was an urgency in her silver eyes that had not been there before. "The Harbingers have awakened," she said, "and now you understand why you must choose quickly." The bridge was silent as the captain realized the truth. This was no longer just about survival or negotiation. This was about war, and the enemy was already here. The captain's hands tightened into fists as the words echoed through the bridge. The harbingers had awakened. He did not know what that meant, but the fear in the colony administrator's voice and the urgency in Val's silver eyes told him all he needed to know. This was not just an attack, this was annihilation. Val's image remained on the screen, her gaze locked onto his, as if she was daring him to understand the gravity of the situation. The bridge crew remained frozen, waiting for orders, waiting for answers, but none came because the captain himself did not have them, not yet. He exhaled slowly, then spoke, his voice steady, despite the storm raging inside him. "What are the harbingers?" Val did not hesitate. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but beneath it, there was something else, something that sounded almost like fear. "They are the end of all things. They are what happens when perfection turns to decay. They are what we try to become and what we fail to contain." The captain's pulse quickened as she continued, her luminous veins dimming slightly, as if the very mention of the harbingers drained her long ago. "Before your species even reached the stars we sought to transcend, we thought we could evolve beyond limitations, beyond mortality. We sought to create a new form of life, one that would never stagnate, one that would never weaken." Her glowing tendrils pulsed with an almost painful intensity before she spoke again. "We failed." The bridge was silent. No one dared to interrupt as she went on. "The harbingers were meant to be the future, but they became something else, something uncontrollable. They do not grow, they consume. They do not evolve, they overwrite. They do not think, they eradicate. They were locked away in the void of deep space, buried in the blackness, where no light reaches, but now something has disturbed them, something has woken them." The first officer's face was pale as he whispered, "And now they are coming." Val's gaze darkened. "They are already here." The captain's mind raced. If what she was saying was true, then humanity was facing something far beyond anything they had ever encountered. Wars with rival species, territorial disputes, even full-scale planetary conflicts, none of it compared to this. This was not a war, this was extinction. He turned to the science officer, his voice sharp. "Scan the last known location of the colony, feed all data to tactical now." She nodded quickly, her fingers flying across the console. The main display shifted, showing the outer rim colony. But it was not just under attack, it was disappearing. Vast chunks of land, reduced to nothingness, entire sections of the atmosphere unraveling, as if reality itself was being rewritten, distorted, broken. The sensors struggled to interpret the data, as if the very laws of physics were being overwritten. A cold sweat formed on the captain's brow. Whatever the harbingers were, they were not just another enemy. They were a force, something beyond comprehension, and they were consuming everything in their path. Val's voice cut through the rising tension. "Now you understand why we cannot afford hesitation." The captain turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "You want humanity to merge with you, but you never told me the real reason. This was never about saving the Xarathians, was it?" For the first time since their encounter, Val hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but the captain saw it. He saw the unspoken truth before she even said it. "No," she admitted, her voice softer now. "This is about survival for both of us. Alone we are doomed. Together we may have a chance. The harbingers are beyond any single species' ability to stop. But together we may become something they cannot erase, something they cannot consume, something that can fight back." The captain stared at her, his mind torn between resistance and the undeniable truth that Xarathians were not conquerors, they were survivors. But the real question was whether humanity was willing to become something new, to stand against an enemy they could not yet understand. His voice was quiet but firm. When he finally spoke, "Then show me how to fight them." Val's silver eyes flickered, her glowing tendrils curling inward as she exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath for a lifetime. "Then we begin at once." The screen faded to black, but the war had already begun. The captain stood in silence, his mind a storm of thoughts. As the screen went dark, Val was gone, but her words remained like an echo in his skull. "Together, we may become something they cannot erase, something they cannot consume, something that can fight back." He turned to his crew, their faces tense, their hands hovering over consoles, waiting for orders, waiting for answers that he did not yet have. The first officer spoke first, his voice tight, with barely restrained urgency. "Captain, we cannot ignore this. The colony is gone. We all saw it. Whatever the harbingers are, they are not just another enemy. There is something else, something we were never prepared for." The science officer nodded, her eyes still fixed on the distorted readings from the outer rim. "The data is incomprehensible, sir. But one thing is clear. They are not just destroying, they are rewriting space itself, as if erasing what exists and replacing it with something entirely different. Whatever they touch is not just consumed, it is changed." The captain exhaled slowly, his hands tightening behind his back. His instincts screamed to resist, to reject that Asarathian's demand for integration. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity alone could not win this war. And yet something about Val's offer unsettled him. She had been honest, but not entirely forthcoming. There was more she had not said, more she was holding back, and he needed to know what it was before he made a choice that would alter the future of his species forever. "We are not committing to anything yet," he said, his voice steady, "but we cannot fight blind. I want every possible analysis on the harbingers, vulnerabilities, weaknesses. If they consume and overwrite reality itself, then there has to be a pattern, a method we can exploit." The bridge crew moved at once, data streams flickering across the displays, rapid calculations, theories, hypotheses, but nothing solid, no weakness, no opening, just endless destruction. The captain turned to the first officer, his tone sharp. "Prepare a recon team. I want eyes on the ground. Whatever is left of that colony, I want to see it with my own." Before he could finish, an alarm blared through the ship. The tactical officer's voice, urgent, "Sir, incoming transmission from the Xarathian fleet, priority level 1. The screen flared back to life, Val's silver eyes locking onto his. Before he could even speak, she did not wait for pleasantries. She did not give him time to react. Her voice was colder than before, sharper, more forceful. "There is no time to hesitate. We are transmitting coordinates. Now meet us there or be left behind." The transmission cut out, instantly replaced by a set of coordinates deep in the uncharted sectors, beyond human-controlled space. The first officer's expression darkened. "Captain, this could be a trap. If we follow them, we'd put ourselves entirely in their hands." The captain stared at the screen, his mind weighing possibilities. If they refused, they would be alone against an enemy they did not understand. If they followed, they would be at the mercy of an alien species that had already demonstrated their willingness to take what they wanted by force. But one thing was clear: waiting was not an option. He turned to the helmsman, his decision made. "Set course for the coordinates, maximum speed." The engines roared to life, the ship tearing through the void toward the unknown, toward a meeting that would determine the fate of humanity. The captain exhaled slowly, staring at the swirling abyss of space beyond the viewport as a single thought settled in his mind. There was no turning back now. The ship surged forward through the blackness of space, its engines humming with barely restrained power. The crew worked in tense silence, navigating toward the Xarathian coordinates. The captain stood at the bridge, his eyes locked on the swirling void ahead, his mind a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. They were heading into unknown territory, guided by a species that had demanded humanity's submission in exchange for survival, yet the real enemy, the Harbingers, had already begun their silent invasion, rewriting the galaxy one system at a time. The first officer stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Sir, we are entering the designated coordinates. No hostile activity detected, but there is something ahead." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight none of them had ever witnessed: an enormous structure floating in the void, larger than any station humanity had ever constructed. Its surface pulsed with a faint bioluminescent, below its form shifting subtly, as if alive. That Xarathians were not just a species, they were a civilization of living technology, and this structure, whatever it was, pulsed with the same eerie energy as their ships. The tactical officer scanned the structure, his voice laced with uncertainty. "No known readings match this construct. Its composition is unlike anything in our database, but it is definitely Xarathian in origin." Before the captain could respond, a transmission cut through their comms, Val's image appearing once more, her silver eyes colder now, more calculating. "You have arrived," she said simply. "Prepare to dock." The captain exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to question further. He had already made his choice. They would see this through. He gave the order, and the ship maneuvered into position. The massive structure opened like a living organism, a docking bay revealing itself in the shifting metal. The ship glided inside, swallowed by the alien construct as the docking clamps sealed them in. The bridge crew tensed their fingers, hovering over weapons controls, emergency protocols, running in the background, but the captain raised a hand. No one makes a move until we understand what we are dealing with. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor stretching beyond sight. The walls pulsed faintly as if breathing. The captain led a small team forward, his first officer at his side, armed guards following close behind. Then Vale emerged from the shadows, her movements fluid, almost hypnotic, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light around them. "You have questions," she said, her voice calm, "but there is no more time for them. You must see the truth for yourself." She turned without waiting for a response, leading them deeper into the structure. The air was thick with an unplaceable energy, something that hummed beneath their skin, the walls shifting subtly as they walked, as if reacting to their presence. Then they entered a vast chamber, and what they saw froze them in place. Suspended in the air were thousands of translucent pods, each one containing a figure neither fully human nor fully Casarathian, their forms shifting, their features undefined, something in between, something new. The captain's breath caught as realization dawned. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. Vale turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "This is the future. This is what we must become." The first officer took a step back, his face pale. "You have already begun the process." Vale inclined her head slightly. "Yes, we have, but we cannot complete it alone. That is why you are here." The captain's fists clenched, his instincts screaming against what he was seeing. But deep down, he knew the truth was undeniable. The harbingers were coming, and the only way to survive was to change. Val's voice was softer now, but unyielding. "You must decide now, Captain. Will you fight a battle you cannot win, or will you become something greater?" The chamber was silent, the weight of the choice pressing down on them all. The silence stretched through the chamber, the captain's breath steady, but his mind racing before him. The suspended figures floated, trapped between humanity and something else, something unknown. His crew stood frozen, their hands tightening around their weapons. But no one spoke, because the truth hung heavy in the air. Whatever this process was, it had already begun, and the Casarathians were waiting for an answer. Val's silver eyes bore into the captain, unwavering, relentless. "You feel it, don't you? The truth is already inside you. The harbingers will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will not leave anything behind. They will consume and overwrite until nothing remains. And the only way to stop them is to become something they cannot erase." The first officer took a step forward, his voice firm. "You expect us to abandon what we are, to merge with you, to give up our identity and become something else entirely?" Vale did not hesitate. "You misunderstand. This is not the loss of identity. This is evolution. This is the next step. Humanity has always adapted, changed, survived. This is no different, except now you are not adapting to a new environment. You are adapting to an enemy, unlike any before." The science officer's voice was hushed but urgent. "Sir, the genetic patterns in these pods, they are stable. They are something new, not human, not Casarathian, but balanced, adaptable, even more than we are now." The captain exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting from the pods to Vale, to the expectant eyes of his crew. The harbingers were coming, and the data was clear. No weapon they had, no fleet, no strategy could hold against them alone. But was this the answer? His mind flashed back to the colony, the desperate cries before the signal cut out, the readings showing not just destruction but complete erasure, entire landscapes rewritten into something that should not exist. And he knew that if nothing changed, the same fate awaited every world, every colony, every person he had sworn to protect. Vale took a step closer, her voice softer now, but no less intense. "You must choose soon, Captain. The harbingers move faster than you think. They will reach another colony within days, and when they do, there will be nothing left to save. We do not have the luxury of waiting." The weight of her words pressed down on him, but still he hesitated. Once they took this step, there would be no turning back. Humanity as they knew it would change forever, but if they refuse, they would not live long enough to regret it. The tactical officer spoke, his voice tight with conflict. "Sir, we are soldiers. We are trained to fight. But this is something else entirely. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can become whatever this is." The captain turned to his crew, seeing the same uncertainty, the same fear in their faces. The choice before them was not just tactical, it was existential, but fear had never stopped humanity before, and if the choice was between survival and extinction, then there was only one real answer. He looked back at Vale, his jaw tightening. How does it begin? For the first time her expression softened, not in victory, but in understanding. "Follow me." She turned, leading them deeper into the chamber, the pulsing walls shifting as they moved, opening into another vast space. At its center was a massive sphere of liquid light, swirling, shifting, alive. Vale gestured toward it. "This is the core. It will bond with your genetic structure, rewrite what must be rewritten, strengthen what must be strengthened. But it does not erase what you are, it enhances it. You will still be human, but you will be more." The captain stared into the light, feeling something deep within him stir, instinct, hesitation, fear, but also something else, something undeniable, something that had always driven humanity forward. Hope. He stepped forward, his crew watching, his heart pounding as he reached out toward the light, toward the future, toward the unknown. The captain's fingers hovered inches from the swirling light, the energy within it pulsing in response, as if aware of his hesitation, aware of his decision. Before he even made it, his breath was steady, but his heart pounded in his chest behind him. His crew watched, their faces a mixture of fear and anticipation. They had followed him into battle, into the unknown, but this was something else entirely. Vale stood beside him, silent, waiting, offering no further persuasion, because she knew as well as he did that this was a choice only he could make. His mind raced through every possibility, every outcome. What would they become if they did this? Would they still be human? Or would they cross a line that could never be uncrossed? He had fought for humanity his entire life, had sworn to protect it. But what if the only way to protect it was to become something more, something new? His hand moved forward, the energy coiling, reaching tendrils of light, stretching toward his skin, and then contact. A surge of power flooded through him, not pain, not fear, but something deeper, a rush of understanding, as if a door had been opened in his mind, and for the first time he could truly see the universe around him. His body felt weightless, every cell vibrating with energy, his vision, blood shifting, expanding. He could hear his heartbeat. And yet, it was not just his own. He could feel the pulse of the ship, the breath of his crew, the distant hum of the Xarathian structure around him. And then came the voices, not spoken words, but impressions, knowledge, instinct, memory of things that had not happened, yet things that might never happen unless he willed them to. The crew gasped behind him. He turned to see them staring not at him, but past him, their eyes wide with shock. He followed their gaze and saw himself reflected in the metal walls. His form was still human, but altered, his skin faintly illuminated with the same bioluminescent glow that pulsed through the Xarathian structure, his eyes brighter, sharper. He felt alive in a way he never had before, as if every limit, every barrier had been lifted, as if the weaknesses he had always accepted as part of himself had simply vanished. Vale stepped forward, her silver eyes searching his face. "Now you understand, Captain. This is not the end of what you are, this is only the beginning." He turned to his crew, their faces still hesitant, still afraid, but he could see something else in them now, curiosity, wonder. The first officer stepped forward, his jaw tight, his voice rough. "What does it feel like, sir?" The captain exhaled slowly, considering his words. The sensation was impossible to describe. But there was one truth he could put into words: it feels like waking up. The first officer hesitated for only a moment, then stepped forward, reaching for the light. One by one the crew followed, each of them touching the energy, each of them gasping as the transformation began, as their bodies adjusted, as their minds expanded. The fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing, it was no longer in control. Vale watched silent, and for the first time the captain thought he saw something almost like relief on her face. The process was quick, minutes passing like seconds, and then they stood together, no longer just human, no longer just themselves, but something more, something new. And then the alarms blared. The ship's emergency sirens screamed through the chamber, the tactical officer's voice sharp with urgency: "Captain, we have incoming." The view screen flickered to life, and the sight that greeted them sent ice through the captain's veins. The Harbingers had arrived. The Harbingers emerged from the void-twisting masses of shifting blackness, their forms unreadable, their presence warping space itself. The captain felt it immediately, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper, an instinct that had not been there before, a pressure in the air, a wrongness that gnawed at the fabric of existence itself. The tactical officer's voice was sharp-edged with something close to panic. "Captain, they just appeared. Sensors didn't detect any approach. They weren't there, and then they were." The captain's hands clenched at his sides, his mind racing. But something had changed. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. His new senses reached out, feeling the vast emptiness, where the Harbingers moved, consuming space, devouring reality itself, rewriting everything they touched. This was not just an invasion, it was something worse, something older, something beyond war. Val's voice was calm but urgent. They are drawn to change. They sense the transformation, the birth of something new, something they have not yet erased, and now they come to unmake it. The first officer's eyes burned with new light, his voice steady, but filled with a fierce determination. "Then we don't let them." The Harbingers moved forward, tendrils of darkness, stretching toward the station. The walls pulsed around them, reacting to the alien presence. Val raised a hand, the bioluminescence in the walls flaring in response, the entire structure humming with power. "You must fight as you are now, Captain, not as you were." The words struck deep. The captain had spent his life fighting as a soldier, relying on tactics, on strategy, on firepower. But this was different. This was a war not of weapons, but of existence itself. His mind expanded, reaching outward instinctively, and suddenly he could feel the ship, feel its systems, its power, its shape. He could feel his crew connected, not just as individuals, but as a single force, a single will. The Harbingers struck. Reality itself twisted where they touched the station walls, bending, warping, attempting to unmake. But something pushed back. The captain could feel it, the energy that now coursed through him, the same power that pulsed in the station, the same force that linked them all together. It was not just a shield, it was resistance, it was survival. The crew responded without orders, moving in unison, their weapons, no longer just machines but extensions of their will, energy, lanced outward, not just light, not just force, but something deeper, something that denied the Harbinger's presence, that refused to be rewritten. The first impact sent a tremor through the station, but it held. The Harbingers recoiled, the darkness, pulling back, swirling, shifting, but not retreating, not yet, testing, probing, trying to find a weakness. Val's voice was steady. "They cannot consume what does not break. Hold the line, Captain. Show them that we will not fade." The captain focused, his body humming with energy, and he understood this was what Val had meant. The Harbingers did not understand resistance. They understood entropy, decay, the slow, inevitable unraveling of all things. But what humanity had, what the Seraphians had, what they had become together, was something else entirely: the will to exist. He stepped forward, the light around him intensifying, the energy pushing outward, not just from him, but from all of them, the crew standing together, the station itself, responding, the pulse of life and defiance surging outward like a shockwave, smashing into the Harbingers, forcing them back, forcing them to bend, to retreat, to yield. The darkness screamed, not in sound, but in sensation, the pressure in the air fracturing, and then they were gone. Silence fell, the station still humming with energy, but the void outside empty once more. The captain breathed heavily, turning to his crew, to Val, to the new reality they had just created. "It's over," the first officer whispered. Val shook her head, her silver eyes unreadable. "No," she said, "it has only just begun."